Dr. Felice Chan. Welcome to the High Vibration Living Podcast.
Thank you so much for having me, Whitney.
Well, I really appreciate you being available. You are in Los Angeles, and this is
Yes.
a very heavy time for the city of Los Angeles and for Southern California. And I mean, what an incredible knowledge and skill set you have to help the community of LA right now and anybody else in the surrounding area, because we know the wind blows, right? So at some point, no matter where you are in the US or around the world, what has bubbled up in Los Angeles is going to blow into your neck of the woods. So I'd love for us to chat a little bit about not just your background with herbs and acupuncture today, but lung health as well.
Happy to share and make people feel healthier. I mean, it's been a wild ride in LA. There's so much heartache and so much collective grief. But at the
Mm.
same time, we're also trying to breathe. And the air quality is definitely something that has been impacted. And it's not just a wildfire, it's also urban fires, right? And so when that happens, there's so much toxic chemicals that are released in the air that we're so unaware of. And these particles are small. So protecting our lungs is really important. And the best way from a Chinese medicine standpoint is to eat to nourish the lungs.
Interesting, because it doesn't matter if you smell smoke or not. You don't need to smell anything for the fibers and those different chemicals to be there. So that's
Yeah.
interesting that you immediately went to food. What are the foods that are good for our lung health?
Yeah, so it's interesting. In Chinese medicine, every organ has a color to it, and the color of the lung organ is white. And so when we think about white foods, it's daikon radish, it's pear, cucumbers, napa cabbage, and it's all these foods that are so nourishing for the lungs. And growing up, I always would have a pear tea or poached Chinese pear whenever I was sick, whenever I had phlegm buildup or had a cough. And it was just something that I ate growing up, and it's so nourishing. It's so yummy. Like Chinese pears are crispy, sweet, and you can find them anywhere here, especially in the Asian grocery stores.
Yeah, and they're actually in season right now. So even if you
Yes.
go to your local farmer's market here in California, you'll find Asian pears right now. So the timing couldn't have been better, unfortunately.
Yes.
So when it comes to lung health, so there's foods that we can eat to kind of help break
Hmm.
up anything that's collecting there.
Yep.
You are an acupuncturist. What are some
Hmm.
of the little points on our body that we can be touching and massaging to help make sure that we're keeping our lungs healthy?
Yeah, one of my favorites is located right on the chest. We have our lung channel that starts over here, and this is, lung one and lung 2 point. And so somewhere in between here, it's usually very sore for people. It's also where our lymph nodes are accumulated, and just massaging here and breathing deep into the belly where we activate the diaphragm, this is going to open up the lung channel.
Got
And
it.
there's
So
also
the
so
start fit.
Exactly. And there's also amazing points on the hand. And I like to find this by just kind of crossing my fingers this way. And it's where the pointer lands into this little depression. And this point is called lung 7.
Right at the
And it's
wrist. You
so
can
amazing.
feel the little,
Exactly.
like, the
Yeah,
little
there's a little indentation
divot
right
there.
there.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, it's that pocket of chi and energy that we want to activate the lungs. And so those 2 points are so wonderful. And I've just been massaging it nonstop for the past week.
And how long should we massage it for?
I would massage it for about 2 to 3 minutes and making sure it's consistent. If you can do it twice a day, every single day, and that's when you get most of the benefits.
Got it, because we're just moving any stagnant energy there or anything that's building
Exactly.
up?
Exactly. And then the energy channels, they follow the channels. And because the lung channel starts here and goes into the wrist this way, it also gets into the organ. So we want to create that flow.
What made you go into acupuncture?
Yeah, that's a great question. I was actually in Western medicine for a lot of my life. I grew up in Hong Kong, and even in Hong Kong, the closest clinic to my home was a Western practice. I'd go when I had a flu and I'd get prescribed pharmaceuticals. I think the medicine itself didn't exist in Hong Kong and wasn't as accessible when I grew up because it was such a cosmopolitan city. There was a lot of expatriates coming, a lot of job opportunities. And the way that it was structured, there was that westernization drive, and better education. But Chinese medicine existed in my home as food and nutrition and the way that we ate. And so that was my exposure of Chinese medicine. But acupuncture wasn't, shared with me until after college. I studied neuroscience and pre-med in college, worked for a hospital post-college for a few years, applied for allopathic med school, took the MCATs, I did it all, and then I just withdrew. I was like, this doesn't feel aligned with my values. I wanted to find a medicine that's more holistic and addresses the root of a lot of our issues. And I felt a little frustrated being in Western medicine and working at a hospital and just seeing all the Band-Aid ways of health and healing, and it just didn't make sense. And that's when I applied for Chinese medical school, and that's when I moved out to Los Angeles.
How can somebody work with an acupuncturist to get to the root cause of different symptoms?
Yeah. So an acupuncturist, when you see them, I mean, we do a holistic diagnosis. Like I'll spend probably about 30 minutes with a patient in their initial consultation, and I would love to hear everything. Everything matters from their digestion to their mental health, stools, everything about emotions as well. And everything gives me a clear picture of what organs are imbalanced and where the root lies. And once that is figured out, then let's say the root cause is some imbalance in the spleen, which is really tied to our digestion. A lot of cascading symptoms then would be healed. For example, their bloating, their loose stools, even their weight gain, a lot of it is tied to that spleen energy. So my treatment protocol would be to make sure that the spleen is strengthened.
So for people that don't understand what the spleen is or where it is on the body, can you explain?
Yeah, absolutely. So the spleen is underneath the left rib cage. And the spleen, it's so funny because it's not an organ that's talked about a lot. Except in Chinese medicine, it's just that organ because it's the first organ that receives the nourishment in our food. And it's the organ that transports and transforms fluid and food. It moves what we say, the good fluid and food into the stomach and then into the small intestine to digest. And then the turbid and the bad food and fluid that we don't need into large intestine for us to pass. So it's kind of the center of how our whole body receives energy. And it's really, really important to nourish it.
Is there a season for nourishing the spleen?
So yes and no. So I mean, when we think about seasons, it's the earth element. Uh, and the color yellow. There's always like colors and elements associated with it. I always think you have to nourish the spleen every single day of the year because it's truly the first organ that receives everything and it loves warmth. We're warm-blooded creatures, right? And so to nourish it, we have to treat it gently. We can't really push the cold smoothies, the cold foods a lot because then it starts to weaken the digestive fire that essentially absorbs our nutrition.
And that's one thing that's fascinating because I studied traditional food and healing with foods, and it always comes back to warm foods. And if people are eating salads in traditional food preparation, you're supposed to make pressed salads in the wintertime or a warm salad. Things aren't
Yes.
supposed to be ice cold. And as we have watched health food culture over, I would say, the past 15 years, it pushes cold food.
Hmm.
It's not pushing traditional food. It's pushing these modern concoctions that are made with ice or they're chilled overnight, which ultimately leads everyone that's trying to pursue that path to being unwell. I'm wondering, because you're in Los Angeles where smoothies are pushed a lot, chia seed bowls, acai bowls, all this cold, healthy food is
Hmm.
really pushed. I'd love to know what you see from patients when they come to you with health issues, if they're somehow related to that kind of fake healthy food culture, I consider it.
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree, and it's interesting because there's this understanding that there's a lot of nutrition in smoothies, a lot of nutrition in cold foods. But to be honest, your body can't absorb a lot of it because it's a shock to the system. But yes, I have seen a lot of patients in clinic that have a smoothie every morning that live on chia seed bowls and they come in with such a cold presentation. And you can tell, they bloat easily. Their stools are inconsistent between, alternating constipation and loose stools. They'll, sometimes it affects the fertility as well because our womb likes to be cold. And so it's really also tied to women and our reproductive organs. And there's so many ways that a cold drink and especially consistent cold drinks can affect your body.
Do you find that you have more women seeking traditional medicine and acupuncture than men, or is it pretty even?
I would say more women, maybe in my clinic, like 70% women, 30% men. And I think a lot of it is because I personally think, women kind of seek out the alternative methods to really feel their best. And because acupuncture and Chinese medicine is so effective for fertility and also women's health issues, that's how they find us.
What was the kind of theme of what your patients were needing prior to before the fires broke out? Because I'm sure it's going to change
Yeah,
now because everyone's health collectively is changing because the environment's changing.
of
So I'd love
course.
to know what it was kind of, New Year, end of 2024, what the collective energy was then.
Yeah, I mean, it was a lot of change in season, right? A lot of people traveling, a lot of people exhausted and fatigued. And again, that has to tie back to our digestive health, how we can actually protect and conserve our energy, and jet lag, people feeling like they're pushed to the brim with their energy and capabilities. And when we see that, we see it as a chi deficiency, right? They're so tired that they don't have that yang or that heat to boost them. And so a lot of the treatments we were giving are a lot of warming treatments and a lot of energy boosting treatments.
What are some of those treatments?
Yeah, I mean, it changes per person. Everyone is so individual. So they come in, and every time they come in, the acupuncture points change because it's dependent on how their pulse feels that day, what their tongue looks like, what other symptoms they're feeling. But, one of my favorite points is on the leg called stomach 36. It's below the knee on the lateral side of the tibia. And that one is so good because it goes to the stomach channel, so our digestion. It's one of the best for an energy boost. And in Chinese medicine, the translation actually means 3 leg mile, which means that if you put that point in, you can walk 3 miles. It's so wonderful.
That is so neat. So if someone's listening to this and they're like, "Oh my gosh, I want this treatment. I
Mhm.
want this just sounds so like delicious and nourishing and warming." How long is a traditional acupuncture treatment? And how often should we be going in for our little, maintenance sessions?
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I mean, in an ideal world, I would say that everyone needs this weekly, right? I
Yeah.
mean, when traditional Chinese medicine first came about and in China, you go as a preventative medicine, right? You don't go seek out acupuncture when you are diagnosed, let's say PCOS, or diagnosed, migraines or headaches. You get acupuncture to prevent all of these ailments that you would feel. I get acupuncture weekly. It's something that it's my baseline, it's my meditation. It literally kicks me into an acu high, makes my endorphins run, all my neurotransmitters fire. It puts my brain into meditative state. So it's so amazing. I hope that answered your question. So, I mean,
Yeah,
consistency
absolutely
is key.
does. Perfect. I mean, it's a good reminder.
Mhm.
I feel like it's still the new year, Chinese New
Yeah.
Year obviously is starting at the end of January. So I feel like it's still time to create our new routine and figure out our new wellness routine. And that gets to change, seasonally and yearly.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I agree. And the core of Chinese medicine, it's a nature medicine, right? Our body responds to what is happening outside in the environment. Yeah, so it changes. It's interesting. In the summertime, we get a lot of heat issues, people feeling too hot, coughs, hot flashes, redness, headaches. Those are all the heat issues that come about.
You mentioned that you were recently home in Hong Kong and really
Yeah.
getting into traditional foods. What are some of the traditional foods that you love to enjoy during the winter time?
Oh, I love this. Growing up as a kid, I always had a broth soup. Growing up with dinner, every single meal. It was the first thing I would drink. And this broth soup would be a mix of some high collagen meat, whether it was beef, pork, chicken, mixed with something sweet, even like apples or papaya, and boiled for like 3 to 4 hours. And then we throw in all the Chinese herbs, the ginseng, the apricot seeds, the goji berries, jujube dates. And so in this broth itself, it was so nourishing and so healthy. And I was very sick as a kid. And so going home, it was so fun to shop in Shengwan, which is the herbal district, to learn about its history, to actually buy the herbs and then throw it in the soup.
Wow. So if someone wanted to learn to make a base broth like that, and
Hmm.
it's great in Southern California, you can find the dried juju bees. Is that what it's
Yes.
that's
Yeah.
yeah, you can see that you find them at the farmer's market. Some of the other ones obviously would take a little more effort for people to find, but if they wanted
Mhm.
to explore doing a base broth like that, whose recipe do you suggest that they turn to?
Yeah, I mean, it's so funny because the recipe changes and it's in my mind right now. I have a few recipes on my channel that's in my feed and deep in the feed, but I need to consolidate it. I just started a blog this year, and so I want to start actually writing it out so people
Yeah.
can refer to it because it's hard to navigate Instagram. People are like, "Do you have a video on tinnitus?" I'm like, "I do, but it's deep in the feed." And trying to find
Right.
that, like, how do I dig it out of the
Yeah.
hundreds of videos that are there?
Yeah, and sometimes bone broth sounds simple enough, but people
Hmm.
still need measurements.
Yes.
Oh, easy when you've watched a parent or family member recreate something over and over again and you can just do it yourself.
Hmm.
But sometimes when you're beginning a new recipe with new ingredients, you really need the step-by-step instructions until you get really comfortable and you can start to make it your own.
Yeah, absolutely. I was actually making hot pot last night with my husband and some friends, and I was making the soup base, and I took out all the herbs, and I was just, just grabbing handfuls, and I was like, does this feel right? Maybe 4 or 5 shiitake mushrooms. And I'm like, I could go less, I could go more. But there is definitely a base. It's you try this out, and then you add what you like to your liking, and if you don't like, mushrooms in your broth, you take it out.
Were you adding things into the broth last night that you knew would be good for your lung health, your respiratory health?
Yeah, so I was adding scallions and also we say shan yao. It's a waisan in Cantonese. It's a type of root that is white as well. So it's great for the lungs and also great for our spleen and that connection of transporting that fluids. And it's yummy and crunchy. It's almost like the texture of a radish, but a little bit gooey in nature, like okra, but not so much. And it's a very mild taste.
Are there teas that we could consider drinking right now, either for our spleen or for our lung health?
Yes, absolutely. My favorite tea that I've been drinking, honestly, every single day is pear and goji berries. So both pear and goji berries go to the lungs and it opens up the lungs. I'll cut up a pear, I'll kind of boil it in water for 5 minutes with goji berries and I'll just sip it. And it's so yum, it's so sweet.
It's so simple and it's so interesting because I remember so many years ago, I think almost 20 years ago, going to Dragon Herbs, Ron Tea Garden, the shop
Hmm.
on Robertson in Los
Yes.
Angeles, and seeing them cook the goji berries. And then, down the street, I go to Erewhon, which only had one location then, it was a small little hippie
Wow.
grocery store. And instead, the goji berries would be like in desserts or
Hmm.
in food. And so I couldn't wrap my head around seeing a food boiled to drink because
Hmm.
that's not Western lifestyle, right?
Yeah,
Like,
not at
why would
all.
I waste the pear boiling it in water when I could just eat it? But it's so fascinating that you can take one ingredient and prepare it in all these different ways, which can support your
Hmm.
body then in all these different ways. That there's just not one right way to consume a food.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, it's so creative and I love cooking. I love putting recipes together. And so it's so fun, right? And with my patients, when I think they need goji berries, right, in their diet, I'll always recommend the goji berry tea. But sometimes I'm like, if you have a warm oatmeal that you like in the morning that's nourishing, put in the goji berries and cook it that way, right?
Yeah.
I mean, to me personally, when I eat raw dried gojis, they're a little bit too sweet for me. So the cooking down kind of breaks it down and it's just much more nourishing for the body. We can absorb more of it in a tea and when it's cooked.
And what are we getting from the goji berries?
Yeah, so traditionally it's an herb that we say tonifies the blood and it goes to the liver, the kidney, the lungs. And so it's for all women, I always recommend goji berries are awesome, especially post menstruation. When you need that boost of blood after you bleed, eat more goji berries, drink a goji berry tea every single day for like a week, and it's going to make you feel so much better. Like your lightheadedness will go away, the blurry vision at night, all these symptoms that we feel when we get blood deficient, essentially.
Amazing. So if I was to make a cup of goji berry tea as my dessert this evening after dinner, would I do a tablespoon of goji berries for like a 6 to 8 ounce cup of water? How many would you use?
Yeah, that's perfect. That's perfect. Yeah, I would love that. Oh, that
If
sounds so
people
yummy.
wanted to explore drinking more herbal teas, what do you
Hmm.
suggest they do? Do you suggest that they find blends? Do you suggest that they go for like a single, item? Where do you think they should start looking?
I would always start as single items because a single tea in itself has so many amazing properties, and to actually taste it, to actually savor it. For example, chrysanthemum tea, it's one of my
I was
favorites.
just thinking of. That's so funny.
It's so yummy. But when we
Agreed.
think about chrysanthemum, it's extremely cooling as an herb. It's in Chinese medicine helps detox and helps get rid of, any issues with sickness and toxic issues. And so for example, when growing up we had dim sum, we always had chrysanthemum tea, juhua tea, because dim sum can be fried and a little bit cloying and heavy, and you drink the chrysanthemum to counteract that effect of making it cooling and digestible and also detoxes the liver. So it's so yummy. It's also something whenever I had like eye styes or swollen eyes, I'd use like a chrysanthemum flower put in my eye and it just would go away.
I'd love to know if there's any other after dinner tea drinks that you suggest people make, because that's such a nice time
Mhm.
to wind down. It's such a great little evening tradition. What other teas do you suggest at night?
Yeah, so this is interesting because when we think about nighttime teas, it's all about helping our body digest, right? And break down everything before we sleep so that our energy isn't focused in our spleen, but rather, putting what we say our shen or spirit to rest so we can sleep well. And there's a lot of formulas called bao Baohuan, that is a mixture of different foods that can break down meats and carbs. There's one herb in particular called shanja. It's hawthorn berry, dried hawthorn berry, and that's an amazing tea. It's so good for cholesterol. It's so good for breaking down any of that stagnation in our body post meals.
Now, I know that you just went and bought a bunch of your herbs when you were in
Mhm.
Hong Kong. Lucky you. What are some of the places that you recommend people purchase their dried herbs and their dried teas here in the US?
Yeah, I mean, truly any Chinese grocery store. In California, you have 99 Ranch. You can even go to H Mart, California Market. Any Asian market will have some distribution of Chinese herbs, right? Because Chinese herbs can even be a grain, for example. Millet is an herb, or even sweet potatoes or some type of root like lotus root you can find anywhere in the Asian markets. But a lot of the times the herbs come dried, they're packaged and dried. And then you would boil it then to get kind of the nourishment from it.
Perfect. Is there anything else that you can share with us right now that we can consume, take as a tea, as a supplement, or just a practice that we can apply in our life that can help just calm our nervous system with everything that everyone's kind of seeing online or hearing right now? How can we just make sure our nervous system doesn't get overtaxed?
Yeah, oh my gosh, this is great. I mean, with teas in general, my favorite, I mean, we've already talked about is chrysanthemum, and I love to mix chrysanthemum with rosebuds. Like the actual, yeah,
Beautiful.
rosebuds are so delicious. They're pink and red in nature and also so good for women to boost their blood. And so at nighttime, I always mix a blend of chrysanthemum flowers, the yellow plus the red. I steep in water for a few minutes and I drink it, and it's one of the best to just calm your body, to nourish your body. Yeah, that's my
And I
favorite.
yeah, I love the rosebuds just as that beauty tonic. So
Yes.
I buy rose from Erewhon, from the brand Love, and I just put a little rose water in
Mm.
my regular water every day with a little sea salt.
Ooh. Oh, I love that.
Yeah,
That's
that's
a
kind of,
great idea.
well, we all need extra love. And so I just add love to my water every day through the rose water, you know?
Mm. Oh my gosh, that's awesome.
Yeah, I just try to find different ways to, upgrade my water here and there just to make sure that my body's staying hydrated. I think there's no
Yeah.
one right way. So you just
Yeah.
have to keep playing and see what feels good and tastes good.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, your body needs different things at different times, but I love that idea. I might take that from you and see
There's
how that
2 different
feels.
brands at Erewhon, so just
Hmm.
everyone that's listening to, even if you aren't in LA, someday you'll come and visit LA, um, and you'll stop into Erewhon, and there's 2 different brands. I highly suggest the one that's more expensive that says "Love" on the front because it's more concentrated, so you'll
Mm.
use less, and it ends up being a better deal. So, that's just my
Oh, I love that.
heads up to everybody, and of course rose, whether you put it in your tea, you buy the whole buds, or you just buy the liquid and put it in your water, it's
Hmm.
also one of just the highest vibrations. Like when they measured the
Mm.
frequency of rose, whether it's the essential oil or the water, it vibrates at a really high level. So I always think, whether I know it or not, I'm getting some energetic boost that'll just help me kind of float through my day a little lighter and
Yes. Oh, I
lighter.
love that so much. I mean, to me, I think it's a really wonderful herb, kind of has a feminine touch to it too because it's
Yes.
rosebuds. I mean, it's pink, it smells great, but it tastes great. It's also another herb that, if you do a rose and goji berry tea post menstruation, that's like an extra boost.
I love these tips for post-menstruation because we always think beets, like, I just need to eat beets, but
Hmm.
the reality is, I mean, I'm a chef, and there's even times where I'm just not in the mood to deal with beets because
Yep.
it's messy.
It's red. It gets
It's
everywhere.
messy. So these are great other alternatives that we can always stock in our pantry,
Hmm.
the rose and the goji berries.
Yes.
So this is super helpful. Are there any things that you can suggest that people consume that can also just nourish their spleen so they eliminate sugar cravings at night?
Yeah. So when we think about sugar cravings, it's essentially a sign that the spleen is weaker. So the flavor or every organ again has its flavor, and the spleen is sweetness, the liver is sour. And when you crave sweets, that means it's not functioning to its optimal, right? And so in order to boost the spleen, we need to treat it delicately. And the spleen loves consistency. Like the biggest advice I can give is, eat 3 consistent meals a day, especially breakfast is my number one suggestion. Number two is to eat warming foods. Like if they are craving sweetness, try 1 week, no cold foods, only warming foods, and have 3 meals a day and see how that changes their sugar cravings. And especially when you have enough breakfast and having enough to eat in the morning, you're not going to crave that sugar at night.
Fascinating. That's a really good tip, and definitely one that's supportive for people that are trying to make changes in their diet in the new
Yeah.
year.
Yeah.
When people are coming to you and they really want to improve their skin from their inside out, how do you get started with them?
This question. I went through my own acne journey too. And of course, looked to Chinese medicine and I did it completely natural and holistically. I mean, the skin is the external understanding of what's happening inside your body, right? And it all ties to gut health, which we know in Western medicine too, but also our lung health, our liver, and what imbalances happened. And so when someone comes in with skin issues, I always have to figure out what skin condition they have, right? Is it dry? Do they have eczema? Do they have acne? And what kind of acne? Is their acne drier? Is it more red and inflamed? Is it cystic? And that gives me information on A, which organs are off balance, and B, where we have to focus on. So it's not, a one step shop all for everyone with issues in general. But what I can say is that our skin loves nourishment. It loves what we say our yin and our fluids. So hydrating is one of the best, and also incorporating foods and herbs that are great for the skin. And one of my favorites is tremella mushrooms. It's a white mushroom. I wish I was home because I have all these herbs, and it's tremella. It's like a big mushroom. It's dried like this. It's kind of like a little wand. It looks like a sponge, but it's one of the best for the skin. And it's so good to put in broths and soup. So whenever I'd make a soup or a broth, I'd kind of throw it in there, boil it, and then I'll eat it. And that's so good because it nourishes our yin.
Wow. You need to be having like beauty dinner parties where people just come over
Oh, that's
and
a
they're
good idea.
like special tonic broths and like, you're going to leave looking better the next day.
Oh, it's so yummy. The thing is, it's all so yummy as well and so good for you.
Absolutely. Well, I know like food and health and traditional cooking is really lighting you up right now. What are some of
Mhm.
the other things that you love cooking that you know is nourishing you besides broth?
Ooh, I mean, one thing I love to cook is bitter melon or bitter gourd.
Yeah.
It's a vegetable that it took me a while as a kid to learn to love because it's extremely bitter. It's in the name, but it's green and it's so good for the liver. The color of the liver is green and it helps detox your whole body. So when I was going through my acne journey as well, I was eating a lot of, bitter foods like bitter melon to help detox and purge out all of the stagnation in our body. And it's so yummy. And I'll stir fry that, cut it really thin, put some garlic in the pan, put the bitter melon in, and then I'll crack like a fried egg. And it's like the most delicious dinner, like on top of a little bowl of rice. It's so good.
I need to try that. There's a saying that Dr. Joseph Michael Levery has that is eat bitter foods if you want a sweet life, right?
Ooh,
Because
I love that.
the bitter moves the stagnation. And so if you
Yes.
want a lot of sweetness and joy and you want your life to move in a positive direction, you have to get rid of the stagnation. So
Yeah.
I always think about that, when I'm looking at foods, because I love making a dandelion salad, very similar to the one that used to be at M Cafe de Chaya.
Huh.
Erewhon now kind of makes it, but it's easy to make at home. And I'm sure people have seen it online. It's the dandelion greens with quinoa and garbanzo beans.
Yum.
And I love eating it. I hope you just, if you try making it, soak your garbanzo beans. Don't eat them from a can. Um, just cook them traditionally. It's cheaper and it's better for you. But I always think of that and think how I need to incorporate more bitters into my life so I can
Mhm.
have a sweeter life.
I love that. And I also wanted to add there is a Chinese medicine pathology to that because our liver, is on our right side underneath our rib cage and the spleen on the left. And bitter is on the right, sweet is on the left. And there's a pathology in Chinese medicine where the liver can overact on the spleen a lot. That's when you have the issues of stress induced GI issues, IBS, or when people are just like, oh my gosh, I'm so stressed. And why am I, pooping a lot today? Why are my stools looser? There's an actual mechanism and understanding of that in Chinese medicine. And so it makes so much sense that that's a saying, and I love it.
Bitter on your right, sweetness on your left.
Yeah. Well, technically sours the liver, but the liver also loves bitter to drain, right? Yeah. So
Because
the
that's
liver
so
is on the
interesting.
right and then sweet on the left. Hmm.
Because if sweet is the left in spirituality, you give on your right, you receive on your left. The right is masculine energy, the left is feminine energy.
Hmm. Hmm. Oh, I
So this
love
is
that.
just, it's so fascinating. Like I could just live in a house with charts. Do you know what I mean?
Yes.
Like with all the 50 million body charts of the physical, emotional, spiritual, mental, like all the different charts of our bodies. Because the beautiful thing is you learn in all these languages and all these studies, it's all the same. There's a
Same. Yes.
masculine side, there's a feminine side, there's balance to everything.
Yeah, I mean, even acupuncture channels and meridians, right? It was discovered over 5,000 years ago in China. It lines up with nadis in India, right? In ancient India.
Yes.
It lines up, yes, with chakras. I mean, everything is the same.
Yeah, because I used to do a meditation with the nadis, where I'd move the
Hmm.
energy through the body. And you go through these different phases throughout your life, whether it comes to health or spirituality, and you latch on to different ones at different times you need it. And then you
Yes.
realize they're really all the same. So you just need to figure out the language that feels right at that time.
Absolutely. And my taste of it was yoga and understanding nadis and chakras too. I did a yoga training in Cambodia before I started Chinese medicine school. So it was so interesting to just connect all of that together.
Yeah. How did you find where to go to school to study acupuncture and Chinese medicine?
Yeah, I think it's hard for people to understand how you navigate this. And I think a lot of people also still don't understand that you have to go to school for it, right? It's a 4 years master's program and it's very demanding, right? You're learning Eastern medicine and Western. You spend the first 2 years all in lectures. You have probably a test, a few times a week. You have all these board exams and mid-curriculum exams. And then the last 2 years, that's when you're in clinic practicing. And then after a 4 years master program, which is the one I took, then you have to study. And people will take, 4 to 6 months or even a year to study to pass the acupuncture board in California. And there's also a national board, which is a whole nother exam. So it's pretty rigorous. I mean, people who are licensed acupuncturists go through a lot of education. And how I find it, I literally started as a Google, best acupuncture schools in the US. And then I started diving deep into the history, diving deep into the education, who teaches there, a lot of student reviews. And I was between Emperor's College here in Los Angeles, and there's a college up in Portland, Oregon as well. But at that point, when I was moving, I was in Boston and I wanted to move to warmth and just think about where my adult life would be because, after school, then you find a job or open your private practice. And I think I was gravitated towards Los Angeles more so than Portland, Oregon.
Since you've been working in the field for quite a while now, are there any other schools that you've learned about that you would recommend to somebody who wants to move into this field?
Yeah, I mean, there's so many. I think it's hard to list right off the top of my head, but they have schools all over the country. There were schools on the East Coast that I was looking at in Massachusetts. There's many in Los Angeles. There's like 4 or 5 in Los Angeles itself. There's Yosan as well. There's a Korean centered one as well. There's one in San Diego, but it's also online. So I did my doctorate at PCHS, at Pacific College, Health and Sciences, and they have a campus in San Diego, but I did my doctoral program online.
If people are listening to this and they are thinking, I really just need an acupuncture session, how do
Yeah.
you recommend that they find someone to start working with? Do they just need to look for someone that's closest to them? Do they need to look for someone that specializes in what they think they might need?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think it gets difficult because, I mean, first of all, if you're not in the medicine itself, you're not going to recognize the lettering, like what an LAC is, which is a licensed acupuncturist. Like, what does it mean to have a doctor in front of it? It means nothing to them and the credibility. And so, the biggest advice I can give is if you're in California, there's an acupuncture board in California, and all licensed acupuncturists are going to be listed under there, and so just make sure that they're licensed. For the rest of the United States, there's a national board, which is very similar. Then you can start to explore acupuncturists around you. It's almost kind of making sure that you find someone that you vibe with because it's a relationship where you have to trust them. It's more, I don't really like to think of it as doctor patient. It's more so a mutual relationship where we help each other because with that hierarchy, I feel like healing is impacted and I want them to completely be void and to be able to trust the process.
Are there any other health, wellness, traditional modalities that you also love doing for yourself?
Yes. I mean, again, when we think about traditional modalities, Well, I guess I have to preface, my mother-in-law is a shamanic healer, and
Awesome.
she is the most wonderful, magical, humble human being. And that's a medicine that I am fully so curious about. You know, before my Chinese medicine journey, I was like, should I go to the Andes? Should I go to Peru and just kind of jump on that journey? But of course, with my Asian parents, are like, absolutely not, Felice. Like, are you joking? But that's the medicine that I read a lot of books about it.
Yeah.
Um, books by Antonio Vallaldo is amazing, and just that whole sector of understanding energetic medicine and our energy fields and how we can clear our chakras ourselves, because it's all connected and it's really powerful and tied to, energy strings from past lives, current and future lives, and just how everything is interconnected. It's like a web.
Yeah.
It's beautiful.
Well, it's so beautiful that you have a mother-in-law where your work is synergistic. The work
Yeah.
she does on a person helps them just as much as the work that you do on them helps them. And it almost in tandem helps the layers of the onion come off when you do
Yes,
both
exactly.
faster.
Yes. And I mean, to kind of get it from all facets, it's so wonderful. Like, there's so much in energy healing that I don't understand, that I can't really, kind of take off the layers, right? Like, I know my medicine and I know acupuncture and Chinese medicine's understanding, but I love it, to be with her and to just go on runs and speak about the medicine and just kind of jog each other's minds. And it's fun.
Yeah, and you have someone to call when you have a weird dream. Like it's
Yes.
like the person's, you scored, you know?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I feel so blessed. And I think, meeting her and my husband, it was through my spiritual awakening for my transition from West to East as well. They all came into my life and flooded into my life at the right time and the same time.
Yeah, that is so neat. Well, where do you turn to keep learning, whether it's about your own work in Chinese
Mhm.
medicine or these other fields that interest you?
Yeah, I mean, I guess with my medicine itself, as a practitioner, we have to take continuing ed, kind of a lot of classes a lot of the time. And that's when we find where we start to specialize in, right? What we gravitate towards. Because I have a neuroscience background, everything from the gut and the mind, it geeks me out. Everything about brain trauma and concussions and the nervous system. That's where I find a lot of my interests lie. And I can find that through my continuing ed courses for licensed acupuncturists. And besides the medicine, I mean, there's so many books out there. It's really funny. I was in Vermont with my husband's family, and I was trying to find a book to read because all my books are nonfiction books. They're all spiritual books, self-help books. And I was like, I need a fiction book to just get my mind off this. But that's where I get a lot of my other knowledge from.
Yes, I'm the same way. A very similar book collection.
Mhm.
Is there a particular place in China that's known for being like the center for for herbs or for teas? Like, is there a particular place as an acupuncturist that you dream of going to in China because it's like the epicenter? It's the best place to shop?
Oh, that's interesting. So I went to Lijiang a few years ago, and Lijiang is northern in the northern area, and it's a part of a big region. Gosh, I'm blanking, but anyway, it's a region in China where they have all kinds of herbs and plants and foods because it has all seasons in this area, right? You have the warm, the cold, and so there's so much diversity in vegetation. And I think traditionally that's whatever this name of this region is. Of course, I blank on it right now. But anyways, that's where a lot of the herbs were found, and sourced many years ago. And I would love to just like be in the forest, just be on the ground and, find an artemisia plant, find a
Yeah.
licorice plant.
Yeah, as a healer, are there any other places in the world that you are kind of craving going to, whether it's for the land to activate you or to learn about the healing arts in that area?
Yeah, I mean, I've been dying to go to Peru. I've been dying to go to the Andes and South America too, where my mother-in-law's shamanic healing journey started. I would love to just be surrounded and just kind of be in the earth.
I'm
That
sure
is a
that
dream.
opportunity is coming. I do know Dr. Joseph Michael Lovery's group is going to Peru um, in October or November. I always think it's fun to go to certain places with other spiritual practitioners
Yeah.
just
Oh,
so
I
you can
love
learn more
that.
about like the history of the land. So you get the greatest, output from it. We can always design our own vacations, our own retreats, but it's really nice when you can go with an expert that doesn't know just the mainstream history of the place, but that can take you a little bit deeper on a spiritual
Mhm.
level to understand the land, the stuff that's not
That is
written
the
down
dream.
in our traditional history books.
Yes, that is truly the dream.
Well, where can people continue to learn from you and connect with you if they are in the Los Angeles area and get some hands-on healing from you?
Yeah, so I have a clinic in Culver City. I love it. I'm in the clinic now. It's my little sanctuary. And you can find a lot of my education tips on Instagram at Felice.acupuncture. It's where I share little snippets of Chinese medicine because it's such a dense medicine and really hard to understand for a lot of people if you don't study it, right? And so, each video is a little acupressure point or food, it's understanding of how we can live holistically. I feel that it empowers a lot of people because they learn certain acupressure points or foods they can eat to heal themselves. And it's accessible, right? I'm trying to make the medicine accessible, and that's where most of my content is. You can find more information about the clinic on my website, feliceacupuncture.com. I have two other wonderful acupuncturists and doctors who work in clinic with me, and it's been really great to work in an integrative setting. And each of us have our expertise as well.
Yeah, and you do a great job of teaching online. So you do just like an absolute beautiful job of teaching. You make it totally tangible. Are there any books that you can recommend to anybody that wants to learn more about Chinese medicine or traditional foods or healing herbs and teas?
Yes, 1,000%. The very first book I ever read was called The Web That Has No Weaver. It's by Ted Kapchuk. That was kind of it's a little red book, and it's an understanding of what Chinese medicine is. It talks about the channels, the organs, and it kind of opened my world up to whoa, there's so much more. There's also another book called The Spark in the Machine, and that's a connection to more the Western science of things. And it's fascinating. It's both written very beautifully. Those are my two first books I read. There's also Between Heaven and Earth. Don't really recall the author, but I see the cover in my little library at home. Yeah, but those three books are awesome.
And can you leave our listener with maybe one last health and wellness or herbal tip that they can consider adding into their life?
If it's a big wellness tip, I'm going to segue away from food. And I mean, the biggest tip I can give is we need to find moments of mindfulness to really be healthy, right? Because all our healing happens when our nervous system is reset to the parasympathetic state. If we're elevated, if we're stuck in the fight or flight, we cannot heal. And the best way to do it during the day is, find some time for mindfulness. If it's journaling, if it's meditating, if it's walking, if it's, Qigong or Tai Chi, which are in the Chinese medicine arts, find what vibes with you, find what makes you happy, and try to do it consistently. That's the biggest advice I can give.
That's some great advice. Oh, and just exactly what we all need right now is just a reminder to calm our nervous system so we stay healthy.
Hmm.
So
Yes,
thank you,
absolutely.
Dr. Felice Chan, for taking the time to chat with me today.
Well, thank you so much for having me. It's been so fun.
Hi, friends. Welcome back to the High Vibration Living Podcast. I am your host, Chef Whitney Aronoff, founder of Starseed Kitchen and High Vibration Foods. And this is a great episode for you today. No matter where you are in the world, I have Dr. Felice Chan on. She is a Chinese medicine doctor. She's an acupuncturist with a practice based in Culver City, California, which is a neighborhood within Los Angeles. And so I wanted to chat with her about lung health, respiratory health. Obviously, we've experienced the fires in Los Angeles, which has been emotionally heavy and devastating for a lot of people. And even if they aren't directly affecting you, the air is directly affecting you, whether you're north of Los Angeles, south of Los Angeles, east or west, the wind blows. And so I thought it would be supportive for all of us to learn a little bit more about lung health and the acupuncture points that we can massage on our body, the foods that we can eat, the teas that we can drink, that then moved into us talking about the spleen and then understanding the best foods for us to eat in the winter time, because a lot of what she does in her practice is offering personalized treatments that address root imbalances. That's what she's really passionate about. She was traditionally studying Western medicine before she changed her mind and decided to study Chinese medicine and acupuncture. And so she works with clients on chronic digestive issues, stress related condition, really any sort of imbalance, and helping them get back to more harmony and vitality. We talk a little bit about what her clients were coming to her for prior to the fires breaking out, and then most likely lung health, respiratory, grief will be what they focus on. over the next few weeks or months. And these are all things that going to an acupuncturist is a great way to relieve within the body, physically, emotionally, spiritually, and mentally. Always finding these more natural, holistic options for helping the body come back into balance is always ideal. So I hope you guys enjoyed this episode. I hope it's really supportive for you. Dr. Felice Chan is a great teacher. She teaches on Instagram on her feed, just really great ways of helping you understand how to use teas, food, herbal medicine, acupuncture points on yourself to help just balance and regulate your body and improve your life. So I love this stuff. Hope you do too. Hope it's supportive. You can find the links to learn more about her in the show notes and enjoy the episode. Cheers.